The good news is if you're taking the LSAT in August or beyond, there's going to be less material for you to study. Why do I bring this up? Because getting into a top 14 law school or a top 5 law school like Harvard Law is going to require getting a top LSAT score. LSAT score medians are out of control. Harvard Law's LSAT median is a 174. Their GPA median is a 3.93. Now, my undergraduate GPA was not what I would have liked it to be. I goofed off a little bit too much during freshman year, so my undergraduate GPA ended up being about a 3.3. I got a 175 on the LSAT, which put me in the running for a school like Harvard Law, because back then their medians were a little bit lower. If I want to get into Harvard Law today with a GPA from undergrad of a 3.3, I'd want to have an LSAT score of at least 177 or higher to make up for that. Now, wherever you're at, your GPA from undergrad is likely pretty fixed at this point, but the LSAT is still the biggest impact you can make in your chances of getting in. I was talking with a student the other day who had an undergrad GPA of below a 3.0, and he was asking me, should I retake classes from college to boost my undergraduate GPA? Because, little known secret, if you retake a class from college, then the new grade can replace the old grade, giving you a slight boost in your undergraduate GPA. The thing is, if you went to college for, let's say, 8 semesters on average, you retake one of those classes, that's maybe 1/40th of your undergraduate GPA, a 2.5% impact in increasing your GPA from undergrad, not going to be that impactful. In contrast, if you get a higher LSAT score, if you boost your LSAT from a 160 to a 165, a 165 to a 170, or a 170 to a 175 plus, that's going to have a much larger impact on your chances of admission, and the LSAT's just 2.5 hours in a single day. All that work put into your LSAT score is going to make a lot more of an impact when it all comes down to that single day of taking the LSAT versus all of undergrad. Crazy, but that's how it works. This same student who asked me about retaking undergraduate college classes was also asking me about getting a job as a paralegal to boost his odds of admission. I'm thinking to myself, is this guy just looking to do everything he can to avoid studying for the LSAT, retaking college classes, getting a job as a paralegal? Think about it. Paralegals applying to law school are a dime a dozen, probably one of the most common jobs to have before going to law school. Not saying it's bad. If you are a paralegal out there, just comment below so I know how many of you are out there. I talk to paralegals applying to law school all the time, and you can still, of course, be a compelling applicant. You can still even write a law school application essay about your time as a paralegal, and law schools do love to see that real-world exposure to the practice of law. Not saying they don't, but I would not recommend getting a job as a paralegal just for the reason of boosting your odds of getting into law school, because that time would be better spent studying for the LSAT. And I know a lot of paralegals out there are working overtime, late nights for cases, working till 1, 2 a.m. sometimes for a case, doing overtime. And that can make it tougher to study for the LSAT. So all else being equal, better to have more time to devote to your LSAT prep than less. After all, LSAT is the biggest factor in the law school admissions process. And so if your GPA is below the medians and your LSAT is going to be above the medians, you're going to be a so-called splitter. And good news, law schools love splitters because of grade inflation. A lot of undergraduate GPAs are significantly inflated because some classes offer easy A's, some majors offer easy A's. Of course, it's easier to get an A in English than it is to get an A in engineering. Law schools are aware of this, but numbers are numbers because law schools have to report the highest LSAT scores and the undergraduate GPAs of their matriculating students to the American Bar Association, which then in turn is pulled by US News for calculation in the rankings. And the ABA and the US News rankings do not distinguish between GPAs regardless of what major they came from. So at the end of the day, your GPA is what it is, your work experience is what it is, but you can still have a massive impact on your odds of getting into law school, which is why I'm saying here, focus on the LSAT. Now, whether you're brand new to the LSAT or you've been studying for it for a while, I'm going to break down for you my LASER approach to LSAT prep to help you orient your LSAT studying. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review, and it is the foundation of all of my day-by-day LSAT study plans that we create for our students at LSAT Unplugged. If you're interested in finding out more, if you're aiming for a 170 plus on the LSAT, you can check out the links below this video to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. So that LASER approach. First phase is L for learning. This is building a strong foundation in the LSAT, learning the different sections and the different question types. Of course, No more logic games on the LSAT, less material for you to study. You can narrow your focus to logical reasoning, learning all of the 15 or so different types of logical reasoning questions, focused on the most common ones to start off with: necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. You might want to read one of those 500-page LSAT phone books out there to learn the basics, or more likely, you might want to use short, bite-sized foundational video lessons like what we offer at LSAT Unplugged to help you get a proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. Once you have a general sense of the appropriate strategy to apply to a given question, you then move on to A for accuracy, drilling questions by type to get crystal clear on how to approach, say, a strengthened question from a weakened question. Then you move on to phase 3 of the laser approach, S for sections, doing timed sections to work on your pacing, determining how you allocate your time over the course of the section. Really important because in logical reasoning, questions are presented in a general order of difficulty, meaning they go from easy to hard over the course of the section. If you are aiming for a 165 plus on the LSAT, I recommend aiming to do the first 10 questions in roughly 10 to 12 minutes, building up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section. You don't want to get bogged down on the easy ones and never even make it to the tough ones. And of course, you don't want to get bogged down on the tough ones either. So you want to get good at flagging and skipping questions to come back to them later after you have finished out the section. Next phase is E for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests so that test day itself will feel like just another run-through and you can build your stamina so that you're not getting slower or less accurate at section 4 of the exam, the final section, just because it was the final section. The final phase is R for review, so that you are better understanding what mistakes you're making and why, so that you can avoid making those same mistakes again. Now, I've developed a framework for review called the Socratic review method, where we guide you through each element of the question to figure out where you went wrong, which tricks and traps you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again. In logical reasoning, for example, your mistake may have come from the stimulus, the question stem, or the answer choices, and so you want to systematically walk through every element of the question, those 3 areas: argument, aka the stimulus, the question stem, the prompt, meaning the prompt, and the answer choices, to figure out what led you astray, what did you do wrong, is there a certain concept that you're not totally clear on, so that you can course correct for next time around, because of course the exam repeats itself. It is a test first and foremost of pattern recognition. And so the more patterns you are aware of, the better you can spot them, the more intricately you understand them, the better situated you are to avoid making the same mistakes again, and the better able you will be to solve the question more quickly next time you encounter a similar one with a similar, say, method of reasoning, for example. So again, the laser approach: learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. You can apply this strategy for your study plan, whether you're taking the LSAT in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, or even a year from now, to help you work through all of the dozens of released LSAT prep tests out there. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.